Why hello everyone, and before we get started I'd just like to mention if anyone is interested in buying one of my sculptures, I do have a shop and I'll link it down below. I have 3 sculptures currently for sale there. If I have anything that comes up for sale I'll link it there. But anyway, let's get started. So today I'm going to be making the new Spinosaurus completely from scratch. So this is the new findings of the Spinosaurus. Last year 2020 they found new parts of the tail for the Spinosaurus and it completely changed the look of the Spinosaurus. So I decided I wanted to try and sculpt it from scratch in my interpretation of what I think it looks like. So first off the bat I'm going to make an armature for it. So I've printed off the size of the Spinosaurus sculpture that I want to make, and I'm now using the skeleton as my armature sort of scale, if that makes sense. So I've added some tinfoil to the sculpture and I'm now wrapping it around a nail in a box. This pose, I was going for more elegant rather than thinking about what the creature could actually do in real life, and I scrapped this pose later on. But for now we'll just go with it. Just know that I don't end up doing this pose because the tail looks broken. And thank you all to those who pointed it out. If you didn't point it out, I would have just gone with an artistic preference rather than what actually makes sense. So yeah, I'm using Super Sculpey, which is a polymer-based clay oven bake, and I'm making the tail here. So I'm actually laying it flat on my printout and then cutting out the shape so I get the exact measurements. You'll see me do it just here. So I've placed the piece of paper over the top, and then I'm just indenting it into the clay, and then I can come back in and cut it out, and I've got the exact shape of the tail. And I'm just cutting a slit down so I can slip the wire in. And of course I'm adding oven bake clay to glue to it, just so the clay adheres to the glue. I'm trying a new camera setup too, so hopefully this angle's a bit better for you guys. Let me know. I think it's a bit better, you get to see a bit more of what's going on. So here I've got some sheets of polymer clay, some thin sheets that I've rolled through my pasta maker, and I'm now spreading it over my clay sculpture, just smoothing it out to give myself a base to work with. You can see I'm now adding some muscle to it. I've added some thicker bits of clay, which are just snakes of clay, and I'm adding them where the muscle would make sense, in my head anyway. I'm not the best at anatomy when it comes to dinosaurs because I'm not a paleontologist, but I'm doing my best with what I know. I'm adding some legs here, well, a back leg anyway, and I'm using the reference behind me very heavily to try and match the sort of silhouette muscle structure you can kind of see hinted at in the picture. You can see, although I've got a lot of scale work done on the tail already, it sadly would not move like that according to its bone structure, and that would be a broken tail. So all that hard work will eventually be cut off. So you can see here I've got some armature mesh, and I've now traced over the spine of the Spinosaurus that I'm using, and I've cut that out and laid my polymer clay over the top using bacon bond to adhere it. It's a good way to get the exact shape and the measurements. I'm here just smoothing it all out, and now I'm using a different scraper tool to get this sort of bony effect on the spines. I know some people have sort of interpreted the spine as maybe a fat store, so they've made it a bit of a bulky fat pocket. But I don't know, I sort of see the Spinosaurus as an overgrown crocodile in my head, so I'm going with sort of a scaly, heavy armored, and the frill's more of a display feature. So of course you can see here I'm starting to add some crocodile sort of scales to it. I know a lot of people out there prefer the more bird idea of the Spinosaurus, whereas I don't know, I used to think that about the Spinosaurus, but now seeing its tail and it becoming more aquatic, I'm thinking more and more big crocodile. So as you can see, I'm going with a crocodile sort of look to this creature. Now now I'm using a wooden tool with a sort of blunt end just to scrape in some more scales. Once I've got the scales scraped in, I'll come in with some clay softener and brush it over the scales just to soften them a bit. Very, very slow process, but the detail's worth it. Now I'm adding some belly scales. I'm referencing some American alligators while I do this. So there were some good photos of different belly scales and stuff like that, so I'm referencing them while I figure out what sort of scale effect I want on this guy. Time for its first bake. This is where my lovely fans told me that the tail looked broken, and I had to agree. Yes, it looks broken. Time to chop it off. And start again. And this is my new bird, Amore. Lovely little name named by all you guys out there. Thank you. We took a vote, and then I wrote everyone's name suggestions down on a piece of paper. And then Amore picked it. And of course, the name was Amore. So, yes, that's my little bird. So here I'm reworking the tail. I'm kind of put off a bit by this point because I had an idea in my head of how the sculpture's going to look, and now I have to sort of completely change it because the pose has to be completely different now. So it's kind of changed how the muscles should be and stuff. It's thrown me off, but I end up working with it in the end. So I've just left the tail for a bit, and I've decided to work on the head because the whole pose has thrown me off now. And yes, before you complain about the neck, I do end up cutting the neck off as well and restarting that. This sculpture was a lot of trouble, but worth it. The end result I'm quite happy with. So here I'm working on the bottom jaw, just getting the shape happening and that sort of ridge and indent in the jaw happening. And I'm also making some holes for the teeth that I'll make later on to slide into. Not too worried about the top jaw just yet because I want to make the bottom jaw first. I actually end up cutting off the top bit of the head just so I can focus on the bottom jaw for a bit. Oh, there's Amore again. So here I'm adding a bit of wire armature just to help support the head since the jaw is going to be open. I want it to hold a fish that it would have eaten during that time. I did a little bit of research and I asked a couple of my fans that are a bit more into their paleontology what sort of fish the Spinosaurus would eat, and they sent me some references, so thank you, much appreciated. So I'm getting the basic shape of the top of the head in. And here I am coming in with my poker tool and I'm just adding the teeth. I'm dipping the teeth that I've already pre-rolled and I'm into the oven baked clay, and then I'm putting it into the holes. Now these are the fish I was talking about. So this lovely reference picture was sent to me by a lovely fan, and now I'm using that reference to make a fish. I actually end up making two fish. One fish will go in the Spinosaurus's mouth and the other will hide in the water below. I do believe these fish are still alive today. They're like a living fossil, which is really, really, really cool. So I'm quite happy with how he turned out. He was much easier than making the Spinosaurus. Oh, Amore again, helping me with the tools. So here I am getting a little more oven bake glue, bacon bond, and I'm just adding it around the base of the teeth just to give them a little more strength, because they are very tiny teeth. And now I'm adding the top jaw. Just making sure everything's sort of working right and getting the shape down, and then I'll add the teeth. Also measuring the fish up just to make sure the fish is going to sit in the mouth correctly. So you can see I'm using this little poker tool now to poke some teeth holes in. I'm trying very hard not to do the glad wrap effect, I think people refer to it as, when people pull the skin tight over the dinosaur's bones and forget to add fat and muscle. But again, I'm going with a crocodile look, and crocodiles tend to have a lot of their skull shape sort of showing through under their skulls. So I'm trying to add a little bit of muscle tone, but at the same time keeping that thin head sort of shape to the skull. So there's some teeth added, and the jaw all carved out. So here I'll start adding some clay behind the head and some muscle tone to the jaw. Quite happy with how the head shape turned out. So now I'm adding some scales to the face. Again, I'm referencing different crocodiles and alligator sort of head references to see where the scales sort of sit on them. And this is the clay softener. I'm just brushing over all the scales just to soften them a bit. Now I'm measuring up the fish, and I'll end up bacon bonding the glue around the fish just to secure it to the face, and then I'll chuck it in the oven and bake it just like that. And this is where I realized the neck looked terrible. And a lot of my fans pointed out that the neck looked terrible too, so I decided to chop off the head, chop off the body, start the neck again. So I went with more referencing of crocodiles. I even brought in a bit of inspiration from the aisles here, and started sculpting in some more harder scales on the back of the new neck. I know a lot of people are going to say the neck's too thick, but I was using a lot of references for big crocodiles and big alligators, and they seem to have a big neck, especially when extended, so I kind of went with a bigger neck because I am assuming they don't really have chewing teeth, so they have some more teeth that's more for gripping and then swallowing whole, so I'm going to assume the neck needs to be big too. Sorry, I'm not a paleontologist, but I am doing a lot of assuming here, and I'm hoping the sculpture still turns out okay. So this is the first time I'm ever going to use air dry clay, and probably the last, because this was a nightmare. I would rather use oven baked clay, even though it's vastly more expensive. This was a nightmare. It was so incredibly messy to work with. I don't really do mess too well, and this was so messy. Dirtied everything, and then even it took 48 hours to set, which was a lot of time wasted, and then even once it was set, it was still so fragile. Thankfully it gets surrounded by resin in the end, so it's very strong, but yeah, I'm not a fan of air dry clay. Maybe I'm doing something wrong because this is the first time I'm using air dry clay, but yeah, it was a nightmare to me. Absolute messy nightmare. So here I'm just posing up the Spinosaurus just to make sure it's okay. I haven't done the feet yet because they're going to pose over the rocks, so I need to do the rocks before I pose and sculpt the feet. So I'm using tinfoil here just to get a more natural look to the clay, which again, air dry clay sort of absorbs it after a while and flattens and smooths itself out. Maybe I added too much water and that's why it did it, but anyway, it was frustrating. I'm sorry. So here I'm adding my plaque and measuring it out just to making sure it fits okay before I leave it to air dry. Now I'm using my stamp just to stamp my signature into it. And now I wait the 48 hours for it to dry. Now, finally it's dried. I'm using my Citadel texture medium in sand, and I'm using that to build the sand up on the base. Give it a nice gritty base to the river that it's going to be in. I love this stuff. It is a fantastic way to get a realistic looking earth. Now I'm coming in with some mineral powder. It's actually sort of grains of sand. This was sent to me by the lovely Higagen Creatures. Thank you. This stuff ended up adding another layer of texture to the dirt, which is fantastic. Thank you. So now I finally started painting the base. So I'm coming in with some Jo Sonja, different shades of brown. There's 3 different shades of brown I use. They're all Jo Sonja. And I'm of course doing this in a sort of wet sort of paint style where I'm using the wetness of the paint to blend the next color of the paint. This sort of gives a sort of more natural look. You can see I've come in with a more reddy, earthy tone, and I'm using the wetness of the paint below to sort of blend it. Now I'm coming in with my grey from Hallcraft, and I'm just giving a base coat to the rocks. While you watch me paint rocks, I might give an update as to why my channel has been extremely quiet and slow. A lot of you will have noticed because I did make an announcement as to why I've been so quiet and stuff. My last surgery from last year actually went fantastic, and a dream I put on the back burner because I thought I would never pass the medical actually ended up being passable because my surgery was an absolute success and I'm healed. I'm not classed as disabled anymore. I'm healing. It's fantastic. And I can now pass the medical to become a pilot. So the moment I could pass, I actually started training for my license. So that's where all my time has been going, into studying to become a pilot. It's been quite exciting. If you're interested in seeing me learn to be a pilot for whatever reason, it is linked in my Instagram. I'll link it down below, but it's just me with planes. Seriously, not that interesting, but to me it's fantastic. Anyway, back to this. I am using a lighter color of Jo Sonja and I'm dry brushing it on, and this gives us sort of, picks up all the sort of features in the rock, and I'm also giving a streaky effect to the outside to give the sort of layered effect in rocks that archaeologists use to determine what age the rock is. So now I'm coming in with my fantastic Citadel wash and I'm brushing that on everything because this will bring out the shadows and make everything look so wonderful. I love my washes. You can just see them bringing the rocks to life. It looks really dark here, but once it dries it'll be lighter and it just brings so much more life to the piece. So now I've gone outside and I've gotten some different bits of grass and sticks and leaves and bits, and I'm gluing them down to give it a sort of a realistic environment. I got this idea from a different YouTuber who does different dioramas and stuff. He goes out to his backyard too and gets different bits of grass and leaves, and I've chopped up the leaves here to sprinkle them all over the ground as well, just like he does. And I'll use a ink dropper and water Mod Podge mix, which I'll link at the guy's channel down below that I learnt this from. I can't think of the name right now, but he's fantastic to learn from when you're learning how to do dioramas. I learnt this technique from him. So now it's finally time to sculpt the feet because the rocks are ready for the shaping. So I'm literally just putting the clay on using Bacon Bond, and I'm constantly checking with the sculpture just to make sure the feet are fitting in and moving over the rocks correctly. Now I've made some little claws and I'm just sitting them into the little holes that I've already made in the feet, and then I'll use Bacon Bond to glue them in, and then I'll bake everything. Time to paint. So I'm starting off with a base coat from Citadel, which is a spray based paint in cream, and now I'm coming in with a Jo Sonja grey tone to start off with the belly colours, and I'm referencing different crocodiles here just for my colour tones, but I'm going with a more grey tone rather than a greeny brown, if that makes sense. But yes, So we're starting off with a grey. And there's a moray again. God, I love that bird. He's so cute. I love that bird so much. So now I'm coming in with a slightly darker grey. It doesn't look like it's a darker grey, but it will eventually when I start painting in more areas, and I'm sort of just envisioning where the darker areas will be due to shadows or due to skin texture and stuff like that. And now I'm coming in with some red tones just to try and bring some more display feature to the spine, and I thought I would add some to the head as well, since it had that little head crest on the skull. Now I'm bringing in an even redder red, a more brighter red I should say, and I'm just adding it to the center of all those feature circles, just to give it a bit more life. And now my fantastic Citadel wash. This isn't the end colours I have, I'm just adding the wash in now so I can come up with some different colours a bit later that I don't want it to be dulled by the wash. But you can see how much the wash just brings this whole piece to life. It's gone from a sort of stone looking grey to all of a sudden this full of life creature. So here I'm actually bringing in some yellow, a grey yellow, and I'm just painting it into the centre of the circles again to add a little more colour. Now I'm adding some black to the claws. The whites to the eyes, and I've added a bit of yellow to the center of the circles, a brighter yellow. And I've added a darker sort of stripy effect over its body. So now this was a different kind of resin for me to use. This sets in 24 hours and is a 2-part resin. I won't give a tutorial on it because this was my literal first time ever using it. That's why there's no pigment in the resin either, because I just wanted to see how well I did, and I think I did well. It took me 4 layers to do, which because I wasn't measuring correctly, but yes, I figured it out in the end and I'm quite happy with the result. The water is such a great wavy wobbly effect thanks to the tape technique I used, and yeah, very happy with water. So now I'm just painting the base black, getting that all looking nice. I'll add some leg stands to the bottom of the base as well, and I'll seal it all in a nice glossy varnish. Well, the base in glossy varnish. The sculpture itself is not done yet. It's so satisfying seeing that black go onto the base. It just takes the sculpture from looking cheap to all of a sudden looking fancy, in my opinion. Probably not for everyone, but for me it just makes it look fancy. So now I'm using my Liquitex gel medium and I'm dabbing this on. This stuff is fantastic for making ripples and rapids. So I'm dabbing it on lightly here to give a sort of a ripple to the water effect, because there's a lot of movement happening in this water. This big thing just came out of the water. So there's a lot of ripple happening. So I'm coming in with my first layer of ripples, which is just a dabbing effect. And then I'll come in with some thicker layers later on, which you can see here, and I'm even dabbing it underneath the Spinosaurus as if it was dripping down, because I want this creature to look like it's just come out of the water. So I'm literally being very messy with this gel medium and adding water everywhere. Now I'm coming in with some acrylic white, and I'm just adding it to where there'd be most turbulence in the water. So sort of where the feet are scraping through the water, where the tail's being dragged out, and where the water's hitting rocks and where it's hitting the fish's fin. Just to make it all make sense, because yeah, water turns white when it's been aggravated a lot. I'm even dry brushing a bit of white underneath the Spinosaurus because a lot of water is dropping down from the Spinosaurus into the water below. Now I'm adding my different plants. I've also painted these plants in different colours to give them different dead leaves and different life, and I've also given them a brown wash with Citadel. And now I'm just gluing them to the base. Now the satisfying peel of the plaque. And that's the sculpture done. I'm very happy with how it turned out. I'm so glad it was done because, my god, the amount of times I had to remake things. I'm glad it's done now, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I learned a lot from the resin, which is great because I want to make some more heavy water pieces in future. Maybe something in Subnautica or something like that, that'd be cool. But who knows, for now I've got some projects lined up. Perhaps a Dilo dog for Mr. Mosasaur, that would be exciting. But yeah, that's the Spinosaurus. This is my interpretation of the new Spinosaurus. I see him as a giant big crocodile. And yeah, I hope you all like it. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Or I'll see you up in the sky, because I'm becoming a pilot, and I'm so damn happy about it. So yeah, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye!